You probably have heard about the story of the hare and the tortoise, or other title is The Rabbit and the Turtle. Right? I'm sure that most of you, if not all, are familiar with that story. The rabbit or the hare lost because he was very complacent. He felt that he is so good that there's no reason for him to be really doing his best, because after all, he is competing with one of the slowest animals in the forest, the turtle. Who would have ever thought that that turtle would win the race? So this rabbit was very complacent, and because of that, he lost the race. Now, you see, brethren, complacency is one of those dangerous things because it makes you think that you are good enough. I remember when I was still in high school, we have this, my classmate is actually the future valedictorian of our batch at that time. She was really, I would say, brilliant, very intelligent girl, and she's very good in almost every subject. I would say every subject that we have. But there was this one time, I don't know if you remember this one time, when pocketbooks have become a very popular trend at that time, maybe 90s, during the 90s, pocketbooks. And this particular classmate of mine got so addicted with pocketbooks that she felt complacent that even if she will not study, because we are going to have a quiz on that day, even if she will not study, she would still get good grades. But lo and behold, because she was very complacent, when the final results came in, she had a very low score. And I remember I was so happy because I got a higher score than her, because remember, this is our future valedictorian. That's just me being very competitive. But actually, that's what happened when you become complacent. And I'm sure that you also have your own stories of the time when you were very complacent, and because of that, you became you had a negative result of what happened. I remember personally, I also became complacent sometimes when I play basketball. Right? Sometimes I kind of underestimate my opponent, and I feel like, he's so small, so thin. Sino bang matatalo nito? Di ba? Then, after a few shots, and you realize that the score is the gap between your score is so big, and you cannot hindi mo na mahabol yung score. So, complacency is actually very dangerous in our lives. But there's one type of complacency that I would say more dangerous. And I would say that as we gear up for the Feast of Tabernacles, this type of complacency could actually affect the success of our feast. Yes, this is how serious this problem is. I'm talking about the spiritual complacency. Spiritual complacency. Spiritual complacency is that when you feel so comfortable with your faith, and you feel like you are so good enough that you don't see anymore the need to grow or do your best in your pursuit with God. So this is the problem I want to highlight, because the problem with complacency, brethren, is that it doesn't come with red flags. It is very subtle. Sometimes it is very difficult to identify, and before you know it, before you have identified that you have complacency, you have already drifted so far away from Yahweh. That's why, brethren, in this morning, brethren, I would like to talk about this danger, the spiritual complacency. In this afternoon, I would like to answer the two questions in this short message. Number one is, why spiritual complacency is dangerous, and then how to overcome spiritual complacency. Okay? why spiritual complacency is dangerous and how to overcome spiritual complacency. So the first one is that, why is it that spiritual complacency is very dangerous? Now, I mentioned it is because sometimes it is very subtle. Complacency does not come with, I would say I mentioned that doesn't come with red flags. This is something that it will not keep you awake in the middle of the night. You will not wake up in the middle of the night saying, "Oh, naging kumpiyansa ako ah." No one does that, di ba? This is something that is very subtle and difficult to identify. What's more, brethren, is that spiritual complacency it quietly destroys us from the inside. Okay? In most cases, brethren, it doesn't bother us. It doesn't bother us because it's not an obvious sin. It is not an outright rebellion against God. Sino pa naman mag-iisip, di ba? Wala lang. You're just complacent. Kumpiyansa ka na masyado sa your faith. And particularly, brethren, this is dangerous during this time when we are gearing up for the Feast of Tabernacles. You know why, brethren? Because when you are too complacent, you will not take the feast seriously anymore. Do you remember, brethren, the first time you kept the Feast of Tabernacles? Do you remember that? I remember it very well. In my case, it was 2004, and it was in GSP. At that time, I'm very glad to be in the feast. It was my first time because it was the first time I saw the brethren keeping it. The first time that I saw how happy people are. You don't have to worry about your things, losing your things, because no one's going to get your stuff. You can trust almost everyone. And I was so glad to have my friends with me. And the first time I sang in the choir. That was another funny story, but I will not tell it yet. Yeah, kasi very short lang time. The first time I sang the choir, and then the first time I played with the youth day. It is very nice, and it was the first time I also learned more about the millennium, the coming kingdom of God here. And I would say that I would say that most of you would feel the same way too, because this is very exciting time. And yet, as the years go by, brethren, you keep the feast every year, it feels like the passion is getting lower and lower. Parang, feast, very exciting, but I've been to the feast many times. I know what to expect. I know the messages. I know the meaning. Oh, yan, alam ko na yan kung anong pag-uusapan nila sa forums. Yan, sa teens, sa singles, sa married, sa couples. Alam ko na yan, hindi na ako mag-attend. Kasi alam ko na yan eh. So, we are becoming complacent. And because of that, brethren, what happens? We don't pray so much anymore about the feast. Diba? Naalala nyo dati when we are starting to keep the feast 2016? Grabe tayo mag-pray dati kasi this is the first time we're going to keep the feast independently. We don't have a corporate church that's backing us. Diba? Grabe. We are truly praying so much, and then next year comes, and then next year, kaya naman pala natin mag-isa. Hindi naman pala kailangan ng corporate backings, di ba? Sometimes, because of complacency, we become, we don't take the feast seriously anymore. And because of that, brethren, we sometimes miss the true value and significance of the feast. And that's why, brethren, it is very important for us to know how dangerous spiritual complacency is. Now, I want you to take note of this, brethren. Spiritual complacency is one of the best breeding grounds for spiritual decline. Spiritual complacency is one of the best breeding grounds for spiritual decline. It could lead us to thinking that we are okay or we are fine, when in reality, we are actually not okay. Diba? It will deceive us into thinking that, oh, I'm okay, kaya ko na yan, alam ko na yan. Because of complacency, we slack off. We don't have that passion anymore in doing what we must do when it comes to in our everyday life and even in preparation for the feast. And if you don't believe me how dangerous spiritual complacency is, let me just give you some examples. What led to Samson's downfall? It was spiritual complacency. He was so reliant and so confident in his own strength that he thought that he could defeat anyone even after repeated disobedience to God. What led to David's biggest sin? David was so complacent that he thought that he will win the battle even if he doesn't go with his soldiers. Kaya isip niya, kaya na ng mga soldiers ko yan, magagaling yan sila Joab, magaling yan sila, dito na ako sa kaharian ko. And then, that's when he saw Bathsheba taking a path. And the rest of the story. What led to the spiritual blindness of the Laodicean church, brethren? They were also complacent. They thought that they were rich and in need of nothing, but they don't realize that they are actually poor, blind, and naked. What's the common denominator in the story of the parable of the rich fool, the 5 foolish virgins, Lot in Sodom, Solomon, and even Peter? It was spiritual complacency. Sobra silang nagkumpiyansa. And because of that, they let their guard down, and that's when the devil saw an opening. And that's where they were attacked by the devil. So, those things, these are the reasons why spiritual complacency is really dangerous. The truth is that complacency, brethren, kills our passion for God. It will kill our passion for God. It steals our desire for more of God and replaces it with the illusion of being enough. So, that is why we should overcome spiritual complacency. Now, we know what spiritual complacency is and why it is dangerous. Now, we have to answer the question, how to overcome spiritual complacency. Number 1, let me give you 3 ways, brethren. Number 1 is, first thing, ask for God's help through prayer. Ask for God's help through prayer. Now, for us to overcome spiritual complacency, it is very important for us to ask for God's help, because sometimes it's really difficult to overcome it on our own. Remember Psalm 51, brethren? This is a popular psalm that David wrote when he fell into spiritual complacency and he committed adultery with Bathsheba. He wrote in verse 8, Psalm 51 verse 8, he says, "Make me hear joy and gladness, that the bones you have broken may rejoice." And in verse 12, he says, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation." Meaning, because of spiritual complacency, brethren, he forgot how enjoyable it is to be with God. But when we rekindle that joy in our hearts, when we remember the first time you kept the feast, it was really joyful. When we recapture and remember that, brethren, it would help us to really overcome spiritual complacency. When we have that attitude, brethren, we will be able to enjoy being with God. And so, in number 2, brethren, stay vigilant. Stay vigilant. In 1 Peter 5 verse 8, it tells us, 1 Peter 5:8, it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." You see, brethren, Satan will attack us when we least expect him. He will attack us when we lower our guard down because of spiritual complacency. And if you are not alert, brethren, if you are not vigilant, if you are not really passionate into identifying the situations that could lead to this problem, brethren, you would become an easy target. So, brethren, number 2, stay vigilant. And finally, brethren, number 3, cultivate a desire for God. Cultivate a desire for God. You see, in Psalm 42, verse 1 to 2, brethren, Psalm 42, verse 1 to 2, it says, "As the deer pants for the water brooks, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God?" You see, brethren, this is a perfect image of someone who is passionate about God. This is not someone who is complacent. Remember, can you just imagine what is the first instinct of a deer when he becomes thirsty? It was to drink. And in the same way, brethren, our first instinct should be, it is to go to God. And what's more, brethren, this verse tells us that we need to have the sense of urgency and necessity. Just like the deer, brethren, the deer knew that it is essential for him to drink water. It is essential for his survival. In the same manner, brethren, it is also essential for our spiritual survival to be passionate about God. Now, this is very important, brethren, to realize. Spiritual complacency is a choice. It's a choice to stay comfortable, to slack off, to stop growing spiritually. It's your choice. But here's the good news. Being passionate is also a choice. Being passionate in pursuing God is also a choice. Being passionate about reading the Bible, praying, it's also a choice. So there's two choices that you can have, brethren. It is either you become complacent or you become passionate. The choice is yours, brethren. But I hope and pray that all of us would make the right choice into choosing being passionate to God. So in conclusion, brethren, spiritual complacency may seem harmless, but it's a silent killer of faith. It lures you into a false sense of security, making you think that you're okay when in reality, you are not. But it doesn't have to be this way, brethren. In this coming feast and in these coming days ahead of us, brethren, Yahweh is calling us out of complacency and into a life of passion, purpose, and pursuit. Hello, friends. I need your help. If this is not too much to ask, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. This should only take 5 seconds of your time. But this simple gesture would help me reach more people and share the Word of God with the rest of the world. You have the power to make a difference in people's lives.